After 25 years of complete silence, Billionaire CEO hears his long-forgotten ex's voice and left everything to run to her. Family, can I share something that's been on my heart lately? We've been building something truly special here. These stories, these moments, this beautiful connection we've formed. But I've been a little bothered, honestly, because I noticed many of you are watching, loving the stories, leaving amazing comments, but still haven't subscribed. And here's the thing. We're so close to hitting 500 subscribers, but we need to reach it within the next 3 days. It's not just a number to me. It's a milestone that tells the world that this family, this storytelling journey, matters. If you've been enjoying our content, if these stories have ever made you feel seen, understood, or even just a little less alone, please, don't just watch. Join us. Hit that subscribe button and become an official part of this growing, loving community. And now, let me speak a blessing over you. May peace flood your heart tonight. May your dreams be aligned with purpose, and may every silent prayer you've whispered be answered in divine timing. I pray joy finds you, even on the quiet days. I pray love surrounds you, even when you least expect it. You are not here by accident. This moment, right now, is part of something bigger. Something beautiful. And before we dive in, tell me, where in the world are you watching from today? Let's light up the comments with all the places our family is watching from. It warms my heart to know how far these stories are reaching. Now, let's begin. Harrison Vale moved through the world like a force of nature, calculated, inevitable, and utterly unstoppable. His 6 feet 2 inches frame carried the perfect balance of command and refinement, dressed in suits that cost more than most family vehicles yet appeared almost incidental to his presence. Those who met him often found themselves caught in the gravity of his gaze, eyes the color of a winter sea that seemed to evaluate everything in terms of potential and risk. Years of negotiation had taught him the power of the pause, the weight of silence, making his rare smiles all the more disarming for their authenticity. His hands, strong and meticulously groomed, betrayed his only visible weakness, a slight tremor when he was alone, exhausted, or reminded of what he'd lost. The scent of sandalwood and citrus followed him, a custom fragrance created for him by a master perfumer in Grasse, yet beneath it lingered something older, the faint trace of graphite and paper that hinted at the engineer he had been before becoming an empire. Harrison's voice commanded attention without volume, a baritone that could articulate the most complex technological concepts with precision or deliver decisions that altered market landscapes. His laugh, however, had changed over the decades, becoming briefer, more controlled. His executive team had never heard the uninhibited sound he once shared freely with Nora, the deep, resonant joy that once made his shoulders shake and his eyes crinkle until tears formed at their corners. That version of laughter hadn't escaped him since she walked away, taking something essential with her. Before the billions and boardrooms, Harrison had been simply Harry, brilliant but uncertain, ambitious yet vulnerable. The youngest professor in Westlake University's engineering department, he designed the revolutionary microprocessor architecture that would eventually become Vale Innovation's cornerstone while grading papers late into the night. He'd met Nora in the campus library where she worked while pursuing her doctorate in literature. She'd laughed at his awkward attempt to find poetry to impress her, instead recommending obscure science fiction that became their shared language. Their 3 years together had been electric, intellectual equals challenging and supporting each other through ambition and doubt. She'd been there at the inception of his first company, working beside him in their small apartment-turned-lab, believing in his vision when investors wouldn't return calls. The night his prototype finally worked, they danced barefoot on their balcony under summer stars, drunk on possibility and belonging. But as success accelerated, Harrison changed. Venture capital transformed his small operation into a tech phenomenon. 16-hour workdays became normal. Promises were broken, anniversaries forgotten. The apartment became a luxury condo neither of them had time to enjoy. When Nora finally confronted him about the growing distance, Harrison had assured her it was temporary, just until the company stabilized. The morning she left, She placed her key and a folded note on his sleeping tablet. "You've chosen your life's companion, Harry. It isn't me." That rejection fueled a quarter-century of relentless achievement and acquisition, success as vindication, wealth as armor against vulnerability, power as protection from pain. Dominic Adler served as Harrison's chief operations officer and reluctant conscience for 15 years. At 49, he remained the only person who dared call Harrison on his worst impulses. With his perpetually rumpled appearance and biting wit, Dominic projected casual indifference while executing strategies with surgical precision. He alone knew Harrison beyond the mythos, had witnessed the rare moments when the mask slipped, revealing glimpses of the man Nora had loved. Their friendship existed in a careful balance of professional respect and personal truth, punctuated by late-night whiskey sessions when decisions weighing billions required moral clarity. Adelaide Porter, Harrison's executive assistant for 2 decades, managed his life with terrifying efficiency and maternal protectiveness. At 58, her silver-streaked auburn hair and impeccable attire became the company barometer. When Adelaide wore red, everyone knew to bring their A-game. She guarded Harrison's schedule like a fortress, yet quietly ensured he ate actual meals and remembered his sister's birthday. Adelaide had never met Nora but had formed distinct opinions about the woman whose absence shaped her employer's life. Phoebe Vale Richardson, Harrison's younger sister by 7 years, represented his only genuine family connection. Running the Vale Foundation with passionate idealism, Phoebe channeled billions into global education initiatives while raising 2 teenagers with her wife, Marielle. Despite his demanding schedule, Harrison never missed Sunday dinner at their brownstone. Phoebe alone preserved memories of the boy he'd been, before ambition, before wealth, before Nora. She recognized the hollow cost of his success but waited patiently for him to discover it himself. Vale Tower dominated the Manhattan skyline, 62 stories of architectural brilliance reflecting clouds and capturing sunlight like a geometric crystal. The sleek glass exterior revealed nothing of the technological revolution happening within its walls. Harrison's office occupied the entire top floor, a circular space with 360-degree views through smart glass that adjusted transparency with voice commands. Here, against the backdrop of an ever-changing city, he made decisions that rippled through global markets. Yet for all its grandeur, Harrison spent his rare personal moments in his penthouse's smallest room, a wood-paneled library meticulously recreated from his and Nora's first apartment. Original bookshelves housed first editions alongside well-worn paperbacks with her notes in the margins. Here alone, surrounded by remnants of authentic connection, Harrison occasionally permitted himself to remember. In stark contrast stood his Westchester estate, 40 acres of manicured perfection where he rarely spent more than a night at a time. The property featured award-winning architecture, museum-quality art, and gardens photographed for international publications. The master bedroom's eastern wall opened entirely to the elements with the press of a button, yet the pristine sheets rarely showed evidence of restful sleep. Most revealing was his private jet, not for its luxury, but for the weathered leather messenger bag permanently stowed in the overhead compartment. Inside, architectural drafting tools he hadn't used professionally in decades, a dog-eared copy of Asimov's Foundation with Nora's handwritten commentary, and a sealed envelope containing the engagement ring he'd never had the chance to offer her, artifacts of a life interrupted, preserved like specimens of a happiness extinction had claimed. The quarterly board meeting had run precisely 17 minutes over schedule when Adelaide slipped Harrison a note. Westlake University Foundation. Urgent. Line 3. Harrison frowned. Board protocol dictated no interruptions. Whatever this was, Adelaide deemed it important enough to break her own rules. "Take 5, everyone," he announced, watching his executives exhale collectively. The moment the boardroom cleared, he pressed the blinking button on his console. "Harrison Vale," he stated, expecting another funding request from his alma mater. "Hello, Harry." 2 syllables. That's all it took for 25 years to collapse. The pen in his hand cracked, leaking blue ink across quarterly projections worth billions. His free hand gripped the table edge as the room seemed to tilt sideways. "Nora." His voice emerged unfamiliar, stripped of the authority that commanded global markets, revealing instead the abandoned man beneath the billionaire. "I'm sorry to call you directly. I wouldn't have accepted." A slight tremor interrupted her sentence. That hesitation, so familiar after all these years, created a physical ache in his chest. Her voice had deepened slightly with age, but retained the cadence that had once narrated his dreams. "Are you all right?" The question escaped before he could compose himself. "I'm fine." Another pause. "I'm calling about the Westlake Literary Archives. The university is selling the collection to developers unless someone intervenes. I know you donate to the engineering department, but these manuscripts are irreplaceable cultural treasures. I thought perhaps—" "Where are you?" Harrison interrupted, surprising himself with the urgency in his tone. "I'm still at Westlake. I curate the collection now, but that's not important. These manuscripts—" "I'll be there tomorrow," Harrison said, already standing, already decided. "Harry, that's not necessary. A donation would be—" "25 years, Nora," he said softly. "We should at least talk face to face." The silence stretched between them before she finally whispered, "The archives close at 5. Harrison sat motionless long after the call ended, his mind cataloging every nuance of her voice while his heart performed calculations no algorithm could process. The implications of her call, and his reaction, were simultaneously clear and incomprehensible. Within 30 seconds, he had committed to abandoning the most critical week of Vail Innovations' fiscal year to chase a ghost from his past. "Adelaide." His voice activated the intercom. "Clear my schedule for the next week. Have the jet ready in 2 hours. And find me everything about Westlake's literary archives." "Everything?" Adelaide appeared in the doorway, concern narrowing her eyes. "Financial status, administrative structure, market value, preservation needs. And everything about Dr. Nora Winters." Adelaide's expression shifted subtly. "The Nora?" "Yes." The single syllable carried decades of unresolved history. "The board won't be happy about Tokyo," Adelaide reminded him gently. The Tokyo merger represented 3 years of negotiation and billions in potential revenue. Reasonable. Responsible. Essential. All the things Harrison had prioritized while building his empire. "Dominic can handle it," he decided, surprising them both. "Harrison," Adelaide began carefully, "may I ask why you're potentially jeopardizing a deal of this magnitude for a university library?" Looking up, Harrison revealed a vulnerability Adelaide had never witnessed. "Because for 25 years, I've built a life around the certainty that I would never hear her voice again." And in 30 seconds, she dismantled that certainty without even trying. Alone in his private elevator, Harrison confronted the truth he'd avoided for decades. He'd constructed Vail Innovations as a monument to what he'd lost, success as substitute for connection, achievement as antidote to abandonment. Yet one phone call had exposed the foundation of his empire. Everything he'd built existed because she had left, and nothing he'd accomplished had filled the space she once occupied. My dear souls, have you ever experienced that moment of absolute clarity when you realize you've spent years building a life around avoiding pain rather than pursuing joy? That instant when priorities you thought cemented suddenly seem malleable? I see you nodding. So many of us construct elaborate fortresses against heartbreak without realizing we've also walled ourselves away from love. If this resonates with your journey, tap that like button and share below what woke you from your own emotional hibernation. Sometimes the bravest act is dismantling what we've built to reach for what truly matters. Let's continue Harrison's awakening together. The Vail corporate jet sliced through darkness while Harrison reviewed Adelaide's research. Westlake's literary archives faced imminent destruction. The university board had already approved selling the historic building to developers planning luxury condominiums. The priceless manuscript collection would be dispersed to various institutions, effectively dismantling Nora's life's work. Only an emergency injunction or significant financial intervention could halt the process, both requiring influence Harrison possessed in abundance but rarely deployed for personal reasons. His phone vibrated with Dominic's name flashing on screen. "The Tokyo team is threatening to walk," his COO stated without preamble. "They're insulted you're not handling negotiations personally." "Offer them exclusivity on the quantum processor integration," Harrison replied, eyes fixed on Nora's faculty photograph. The years had treated her kindly, silver threads illuminating her copper hair, laugh lines framing eyes still bright with intelligence and warmth. "We've spent 3 years avoiding exclusivity," Dominic reminded him. "Then find another solution. You have full authority." "Harrison," Dominic's voice lowered, "Vail stock dropped 4 points on news you've left town. The board's called an emergency meeting for tomorrow. There are rumors you're having a breakdown." The implications registered peripherally. A 4-point drop represented billions in market value. Board intervention could trigger investor panic. In 25 years, Harrison had never placed personal matters above company interests, the foundation of stakeholder confidence now threatened by his impulsive departure. "Handle it, Dominic," Harrison said with finality, ending the call. His sister's message followed immediately. "What's happening?" "Marielle's investment group is panicking about Vail's stability. Are you okay?" Before he could respond, Adelaide forwarded an urgent alert. Financial journalists were connecting his sudden departure with rumors of the Tokyo deal collapsing. Speculation about health issues and leadership stability dominated business channels. The empire he'd spent decades building was experiencing its first genuine crisis of confidence, all because he'd abandoned routine for the chance to see Nora Winters again. The rational choice was clear: return immediately, reassure investors, salvage the Tokyo negotiations, and restore market confidence. The manuscripts could be saved with a single wire transfer and press release, no personal appearance required. As the plane began its descent, Harrison's phone lit up with Phoebe's incoming call. He answered to her uncharacteristic directness. "Is this about her? After all this time?" "Yes," he admitted simply. "Then listen carefully," his sister said, her voice softening. "When she left, you poured everything into becoming someone who couldn't be hurt again. You succeeded brilliantly at creating Harrison Vail, global tech titan. But you failed miserably at remaining Harry, the brother I loved, the man she did too. If there's even the slightest chance of finding him again, nothing else matters. Not Vail stock, not Tokyo, not the board." As the plane touched down on the darkened Westlake airfield, Harrison faced the escalating cost of his decision. His financial empire trembled while his carefully constructed identity crumbled. By morning, he might lose everything he'd built, or discover it was never what he truly needed. Dawn painted Westlake's Gothic architecture in amber light as Harrison approached the Humanities Building. The campus slumbered, peaceful and oblivious to the financial turbulence his absence had triggered halfway across the world. Finding the archives locked, he settled on a bench beneath an ancient oak, the same one where he'd first gathered courage to speak to Nora 28 years earlier. At precisely 7:15, a familiar figure approached, her walk still distinguished by that slight tilt forward, as if perpetually eager to meet the next moment. Harrison stood, heart hammering against his ribs as recognition dawned in her eyes. "You actually came," Nora whispered, keys clutched in suddenly still hands. "I said I would." The simplicity of seeing her, real, substantive, not memory or dream, rendered him momentarily speechless. Inside the archives, time seemed suspended among floor-to-ceiling shelves housing literary treasures. Harrison followed Nora through the labyrinth until they reached a private reading room dominated by a massive oak table. "These are what we're fighting to preserve," she explained, carefully unveiling a collection of handwritten manuscripts, original drafts from celebrated authors spanning 2 centuries. As Harrison examined the documents, a yellowed newspaper clipping slipped from between pages. He froze, recognizing the photograph, Nora and himself at the university's technology showcase, his arm around her waist, both laughing at some forgotten joke. The caption read, "Engineering Wunderkind Harrison Vale and literary scholar Nora Winters celebrate Vale's Innovation Award." "You kept this?" he asked, voice barely audible. Nora's expression shifted, vulnerability replacing professional composure. "That's not." She reached for the clipping, accidentally knocking over her leather portfolio. Contents scattered across polished wood, including an envelope he instantly recognized. His breath caught. The envelope contained his letters, dozens of them, sent weekly after she left, each marked "Return to Sender," each seal unbroken. 25 years of unread words, preserved by the woman who had refused to hear them. "You kept all of them," he whispered, understanding blooming like dawn across his consciousness. "But you never read them." Harrison's mind recalibrated around this revelation, a paradigm shift equal to any technological breakthrough he'd ever achieved. For 25 years, he believed Nora had dismissed his attempts at reconciliation, her silence a definitive rejection. In reality, she'd preserved every unread letter like artifacts too precious to discard yet too painful to examine. "I couldn't," Nora confessed, gathering the envelopes with trembling fingers. "Reading them meant acknowledging what we lost, what I walked away from. It was easier to keep them as possibilities never realized than confront their actual contents." The distance between what he'd believed and the truth cracked something fundamental in Harrison's carefully constructed defenses. He'd built an empire as testament to her absence, each achievement silently dedicated to proving her wrong for leaving. Yet here she stood, having kept physical evidence of their connection while maintaining emotional distance, parallel paths of preservation and protection. "For 25 years, he said softly, "I've told myself a story about why you left and why you stayed gone. I built my life around that narrative. What if everything I believed was incomplete?" The question hung between them, not accusation but genuine inquiry, both intellectual and emotional, the first authentic exchange transcending politeness and past wounds. Their fragile reconnection shattered as Harrison's phone erupted with consecutive alerts. Vale stock had plummeted 15% overnight. Tokyo negotiations had collapsed entirely. The board had scheduled an emergency vote on leadership, a delicate term for coup. His 25-year reign as CEO faced imminent termination unless he returned immediately. "You need to go," Nora stated, reading his expression with startling accuracy. "The archives," he began, mind racing through potential solutions. "Were never why you came," she finished gently. "Your company needs you, Harry." His name and her voice, the diminutive no one had used in decades, struck deeper than financial crisis. Looking at her across manuscripts ancient and precious, Harrison faced the most consequential decision since she'd left: return to salvage his empire or remain to explore what might still exist between them. "Everything I've built is at risk," he acknowledged, watching her carefully. "Because you came here," she added, guilt shadowing her features. "Because I finally had a reason that mattered more than Vale innovations." The admission surprised them both. His phone rang again, Dominic's name flashing urgently. In that suspended moment, Harrison Vale, billionaire, innovator, empire builder, found himself at the crossroads he'd spent 25 years avoiding, forced to decide what truly constituted irreplaceable value. "I need 48 hours, Harrison told Dominic, voice steady despite the chaos erupting across financial markets. "Stabilize what you can. I'll address the board via video conference this afternoon." Ending the call, he turned to find Nora watching him with a complex mixture of concern and something unreadable. "Your company is collapsing because you came here," she stated flatly. "It's experiencing turbulence," he corrected, "not collapse." The distinction proved optimistic. By noon, #ValeFalling trended globally while financial analysts speculated about mental breakdown, secret illness, or corporate malfeasance. Adelaide forwarded increasingly alarming messages. 3 major investors had initiated sell-offs. The SEC was monitoring for irregular trading patterns, and most devastating, Phoebe reported that Marielle's investment firm had received pressure to publicly distance themselves from Vail Holdings. Harrison commandeered the archive's administrative office, transforming the academic space into crisis headquarters. While he drafted statements and coordinated emergency responses, Nora disappeared, returning hours later with sandwiches and coffee. "The board meeting begins in 20 minutes, she reminded him softly. He nodded gratefully, noticing she'd prepared his coffee exactly as he preferred, oat milk, no sugar, a detail she'd somehow retained across decades. The observation nearly undid him amid financial catastrophe. The video conference unfolded disastrously. Board members he'd personally recruited now questioned his judgment and stability. When explaining his absence as addressing a personal matter of historical significance, their skepticism bordered on hostility. Vail Innovations has lost $16 billion in market value since yesterday, Chairwoman Vega stated coldly. Your personal matter has cost shareholders dearly. I'll recover those losses, Harrison assured them. Perhaps someone else should, suggested Malcolm Reed, his longest-serving board member. We're calling for a confidence vote at tomorrow's emergency session. If you're not physically present, Harrison, we'll interpret that as resignation. As screens darkened, leaving Harrison staring at his own reflection, Nora touched his shoulder tentatively. You have to go back. Before he could respond, her office phone rang, the university president demanding her immediate presence. Harrison watched her departure, recognizing the familiar straightening of her shoulders that signaled preparation for confrontation. His own phone chimed with Phoebe's text, board members privately contacting major shareholders. They're organizing against you. Adelaide's message followed, Tokyo team now in discussions with Nexus Systems. Our proprietary architecture at risk. Then Dominic, legal counsel advises your continued absence constitutes abandonment of fiduciary duty. Potential shareholder lawsuits imminent. Each message represented another fissure in the foundation of everything he'd built. The rational decision was obvious. Charter the jet immediately, reclaim his corporate throne, and salvage what remained of Vail Innovations. The manuscripts could be purchased remotely, Nora's collection saved through traditional philanthropy. Yet when she returned an hour later, eyes bright with unshed tears, rational calculation faltered. They're accelerating the archive sale, she reported, voice breaking slightly. The president claims emergency financial measures require immediate liquidation. They're moving the manuscripts to secure storage tomorrow pending disbursement. Let me help, Harrison offered reflexively. By tomorrow afternoon, you may not have a company left to help with, she reminded him, unwittingly echoing his board's ultimatum. Outside, media vans began assembling at campus entrances, Harrison's location having leaked to financial press. His phone buzzed continuously with escalating crises demanding immediate attention, while Nora meticulously catalogued cultural treasures facing imminent dispersion. Two parallel emergencies unfolded in unbearable proximity, his life's work disintegrating while hers faced extinction. Between them stood the unresolved past, 25 years of silence suddenly deafening in its implications. As evening descended, they worked in companionable silence, Harrison navigating corporate catastrophe while Nora documented irreplaceable manuscripts. The familiar rhythm of shared concentration evoked memories of their early days, working late in their apartment on respective passions. Do you ever wonder, Harrison asked suddenly, what would have happened if you'd stayed? Nora's hand stilled over an author's annotated manuscript. Every day for 25 years, she admitted quietly. Why didn't you read the letters? The question had haunted him since discovering the unopened envelopes. Setting aside white cotton gloves, Nora met his gaze directly. Because I was afraid of what I might have said, of what I might have done. Her voice trembled slightly. I left because I couldn't bear being secondary in your life anymore, Harry. Your work always came first, every dinner canceled, every weekend interrupted, every conversation distracted. I became an afterthought in my own relationship. She gestured toward the window where camera lights illuminated the gathering media circus. "Look at what's happening because you've been away for one day. That's who you became, someone whose absence creates global financial chaos." Reading those letters might have revealed a moment of regret or promises to change, but this crisis proves what I always knew. Your company will always be your priority. The assessment struck with surgical precision, lancing decades of self-deception. Harrison had convinced himself that building Vail Innovations represented dedication to excellence rather than escape from vulnerability. Success had provided perfect camouflage for fear, achievement as substitute for intimacy, control as antidote to rejection. "You're right," he acknowledged, the admission physically painful. "I built a life that made me necessary to thousands but essential to no one. I chose that. But you need to understand something fundamental, Nora. I'm watching my company implode, and all I can think about is whether there's even the smallest chance for us to recover what we lost." Her eyes widened, professional composure fracturing to reveal the woman beneath. "There is no us, Harry. There hasn't been for 25 years. "Then why keep the letters?" he challenged gently. "Why preserve every newspaper clipping, every memory? Why call me now when the archives have been threatened for months?" The questions hung between them, neither acknowledging the tremulous possibility they represented, that perhaps the silence had never truly been complete. "My precious family, isn't it fascinating how we often build our entire identities around avoiding the very things we most desperately need?" Harrison constructed an empire while running from vulnerability, while Nora preserved physical memories while avoiding their emotional content. I see so many of you relating to this journey in the comments. If you're finding pieces of your own story reflected in theirs, please tap that subscribe button and turn on notifications. We're approaching the most transformative moment in Harrison and Nora's journey, and I promise, the revelation coming next will illuminate something profound about love, forgiveness, and second chances. As midnight approached, security alerts buzzed on Harrison's phone. Campus police reported media breaching perimeter barriers. Simultaneously, Adelaide warned that board members had secured enough proxy votes for tomorrow's confidence motion. "You need to leave," Nora insisted, gathering his documents. "Use the service tunnels before reporters surround the building." "I'm not leaving until you tell me the real reason you called after all these years," Harrison insisted, something in her earlier evasiveness finally registering. "The archives have faced closure for months. Why contact me now?" Nora's expression shifted, vulnerability replacing professional detachment. She drew a deep breath, reaching for an aged leather journal hidden among the manuscripts. "Because of this," she whispered, opening it to reveal a truth that would change everything. The journal lay open between them, its pages filled with Nora's distinctive handwriting, elegant yet practical, just as he remembered. But it was the photograph clipped to the first page that shattered Harrison's world. A young woman in graduation regalia, her smile achingly familiar, her eyes unmistakably his own. "Her name is Audra," Nora whispered into the devastating silence. "She's 24. Our daughter." Harrison's legs gave way, forcing him into the nearest chair as reality reconstructed itself around this impossible truth. A daughter. His daughter. A living, breathing human being carrying his DNA had existed for nearly a quarter-century without his knowledge. The room seemed to pulse with each heartbeat as his mind grappled with the magnitude of what had been kept from him. "She graduated from Columbia last year, literature and computer engineering," Nora continued, her voice unsteady. "Brilliant like you, stubborn like me. She's starting her doctorate at MIT this fall." Why? The single syllable contained multitudes. Why hadn't Nora told him? Why reveal it now? Why had 24 years of fatherhood been stolen from him? Nora traced her finger over their daughter's image. "I discovered I was pregnant 2 weeks after I left. I was still so angry, so hurt by how completely your work had consumed you. I convinced myself you wouldn't make time for a child when you couldn't make time for me." "That wasn't your decision to make," Harrison whispered, decades of potential memories, first steps, birthdays, school plays, crystallizing into an avalanche of loss. "I know," Nora acknowledged, tears finally spilling. "I was wrong, Harry. So terribly wrong. I told myself I was protecting her from disappointment, but I was really protecting myself from vulnerability. As she grew, I told her you were brilliant but absent, focused on changing the world through your work. Did she believe you? Until she started following your career on her own." Nora opened the journal further, revealing articles, interviews, and photographs of Harrison throughout the years, each annotated in a handwriting different from Nora's. "She's been collecting information about you since she was 12. When she discovered Vale Innovations' Sustainable Energy Initiative last year, she told me it contradicted everything I'd implied about you being coldly ambitious." Harrison stared at his daughter's meticulous documentation of his life, her attempt to know a father who didn't know she existed. "Does she know you're telling me about her?" "She's the reason I called you," Nora admitted. When the archives received the final closure notice, she said, "Mom, it's time to stop hiding. Call my father." Dawn found Harrison standing at the archives window, watching early light illuminate the campus. Behind him, his phone had finally fallen silent, the batteries dead after hours of ignored crisis alerts. For the first time in decades, Vale Innovations' fate seemed remarkably insignificant compared to the revelation reshaping his understanding of purpose. "I would have come back for you," he said quietly as Nora joined him. "If I'd known about her, nothing would have kept me away." "I know that now," she acknowledged. "It took me years to recognize that I judged you based on who you were becoming, not who you might have been given the chance." Harrison turned to face her, decades of carefully constructed identity falling away. "I built Vale thinking achievement would fill the space you left. It never did. Now I discover I've missed my daughter's entire life pursuing something that was always hollow at its core." "You haven't missed her entire life," Nora corrected gently. "She wants to meet you. That's why I finally reached out. Audra's been accepted to 3 doctoral programs, including the Vale Innovation Fellowship at MIT. She wanted my permission to use her real name, Vale, and to contact you directly. I realized I couldn't let her enter your life without preparing you first." Something fundamental shifted within Harrison, priorities realigning with seismic force. The empire that had consumed his existence suddenly appeared in proper perspective, not a reflection of his worth but merely the product of his talent. What mattered, what had always mattered, was standing before him, offering a second chance at connections he believed forever lost. "The board votes in 4 hours," he said, surprising himself with how little that fact disturbed him. "I need to make several calls." The archives conference room transformed into command central as Harrison executed the most important negotiation of his career. Not to save his company, though that would happen incidentally, but to redefine his legacy. First came the call to Dominic, "Activate Project Phoenix." His CEO's stunned silence spoke volumes. Project Phoenix, Harrison's contingency plan for hostile takeover attempts, would convert his controlling shares into a special class with 10x voting rights, effectively neutralizing the board's confidence vote. "You've been sitting on this for years?" Dominic finally asked. "Insurance," Harrison explained. "Now I'm using it differently than intended. Announce my permanent transition to executive chairman. You'll be named CEO. The board can ratify or resign." Next, he called Adelaide, "Prepare the Vale Foundation for a major announcement. We're establishing the Westlake Literary Preservation Trust with an initial endowment of $300 million. The archives will be renovated, expanded, and permanently protected." Her voice filled with understanding. "This is about more than manuscripts, isn't it?" "It's about legacy," he confirmed. "The real kind." Finally, he called Phoebe. "I need you to meet someone important. My daughter." His sister's momentary silence dissolved into tearful laughter. I always knew there was a reason you kept that ridiculous stuffed elephant in your office. How long have you known? Since last night. She's 24, brilliant, and apparently has my eyes. Does this mean Harrison Vale is finally becoming Harry again? Phoebe asked softly. Looking across the room at Nora, who was arranging a video call on her laptop, Harrison felt certainty settle within him. I think Harry's been trying to get out for 25 years. He just needed the right reason. As Nora beckoned him over, he glimpsed a young woman's face on screen, features reflecting both her parents in perfect harmony. His daughter. Waiting to meet him at last. 6 months transformed Harrison's world beyond recognition. Vale Tower still dominated the Manhattan skyline, but its creator now spent more time in the modest faculty residence at Westlake University, where he'd accepted a position teaching computational engineering 1 semester yearly. The Vale Winter Center for Literary and Technological Innovation, housed in the expanded archives, had become his primary focus, alongside something infinitely more precious, building a relationship with his daughter. Today, he sat beside Nora on a campus bench beneath their oak tree, watching Audra deliver a guest lecture on digital preservation of literary artifacts. Through the classroom window, they could see her gesturing animatedly, Nora's expressiveness paired with Harrison's precision, a living bridge between their worlds. She's remarkable, Harrison murmured, still discovering new facets of his daughter daily. Their relationship had begun tentatively, years of absence creating understandable caution, but their shared intellectual passions formed connections her mother's stories couldn't have predicted. Vale quarterly released their projections yesterday, Nora mentioned, studying his expression. Dominic's leadership is exceeding expectations. Harrison nodded. The board that tried to remove me now claims the succession plan was their idea all along. Do you miss it? She asked, the question they'd both avoided for months. Running everything, being at the center? Harrison considered this carefully. The man he'd been 6 months ago would have found his current life unrecognizable, teaching instead of commanding, collaborating rather than controlling, measuring success in relationships instead of acquisitions. Remarkably, the transition had revealed not loss but liberation. I spent 25 years proving I didn't need anyone, he answered finally. Now I'm learning what it means to be needed, by our daughter, by my students, by the preservation projects. It's exhausting, terrifying, and infinitely more fulfilling than anything I built before. He gently took Nora's hand, a gesture still new and tentative between them. Their own relationship remained a careful exploration, neither rushing toward romantic reconciliation nor denying the connection that time had failed to sever. I don't miss who I was, he said simply. I'm too grateful for who I'm becoming. As twilight descended over the campus, Harrison reflected on the paradox of his journey. For decades, he believed power meant never being vulnerable, success meant never acknowledging loss, and moving forward meant never looking back. The universe had shown him otherwise through the most unexpected messenger, the voice from his past that opened the door to his future. True power, he discovered, lay not in independence but in meaningful connection. His corporate title had commanded global respect, yet left him fundamentally alone. Now, as Professor Vale, Audra's father, Nora's friend, Phoebe's brother, he existed within a web of relationships that both challenged and sustained him. The most profound revelation had been discovering that time, properly understood, was neither enemy nor healer, but simply the medium through which love could mature and wisdom could develop. 25 years of separation hadn't diminished what mattered between himself and Nora, it had clarified it, distilling youthful passion into something deeper, mutual respect, shared purpose, and the recognition that some bonds transcend circumstance. His greatest achievement wasn't the technology that transformed industries or the wealth that enabled philanthropy. It was having the courage, finally, to dismantle the walls he'd built around his heart and discover that vulnerability wasn't weakness but the ultimate strength. My beautiful family, I see from your comments how deeply Harrison's journey resonates with many of you. Some have shared stories of reconnections after decades of silence, others about discovering family you never knew existed. Many more have confessed to building impressive external lives while nurturing private emptiness, success that looks magnificent from outside but feels hollow within. This story touches something universal in the human experience, our tendency to construct elaborate defenses against pain that inadvertently block joy as well. We pursue achievement, perfection, or independence to avoid vulnerability, not realizing that meaningful connection requires precisely what we fear most, opening ourselves to potential hurt. Whether you're currently guarding your heart behind professional success, afraid to reach out to someone from your past, or hesitating to reveal your authentic self, remember Harrison's realization: the very walls we build for protection eventually become our prisons. Your turning point might not involve a billion-dollar company or long-lost child, but the principle remains. Sometimes our greatest growth begins when we step away from what we've built to pursue what truly matters. The journey toward authentic connection often requires dismantling our most impressive fortresses, a terrifying process that leads to our most profound liberation. Before we part today, my cherished friends, I invite you to consider, what fortress have you built that might actually be your prison? What voice from your past might hold the key to your future? Perhaps there's a conversation you've been avoiding, a vulnerability you've been protecting, or a truth you've been hiding, even from yourself. If Harrison and Nora's journey has touched something in your heart, take a moment to share below how their story connects with yours. Our community grows stronger when we recognize ourselves in each other's experiences. For those finding special meaning in today's narrative, please consider subscribing and turning on notifications. Every day, we explore these profound human journeys together, finding light in shared stories that illuminate our own paths. Remember, my beautiful souls, it's never too late to hear the voice that calls you toward authenticity. It's never too late to leave behind what you've built for what truly matters. And it's never too late to discover that your greatest strength lies not in what you achieve alone, but in what you become brave enough to share with others. Until next time, may you find the courage to answer when love calls your name, even after 25 years of silence.